It is the News Blitz with Randy Wang on Talk Radio 790 KABC. We're here every single day from 5 to 6 talking about the local issues that matter to you most and taking your phone calls at 800-222-5222, 1-800-222-5222, your emails at randywangradio@gmail.com. Search for the KABC News Blitz wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to the California Report by getting on my Substack for free, randywangradio.substack.com. Let's get into today's California Report for the 11th of February, 2026. And we start in Los Angeles, in Lincoln Heights, where a celebration is happening because LA is installing solar-powered streetlights. Yay! Why are we installing solar-powered streetlights? Because we know that if we install regular streetlights, the copper wire will get stolen.
Let's criminalize catalytic converters. Let's criminalize copper.
Now, what happens when we find out that the materials inside the solar lights are also valuable to criminals and smelters alike? I don't know. But this is the current solution to the problem because we're not going to be able to quote, Ulysses, criminalize our communities to go after this. We can't seem to go after the people who are smelting down the copper wire. It takes nearly a year to get one of these things fixed. So what if we could replace them all with, I'm assuming, more expensive technology? What could possibly go wrong? But we will follow that. In a weird indictment of the city, but she acted like it was a defense. When Eunice Hernandez promoted this program, she wanted people to know that, hey, only half of the streetlights that are out because of copper wire theft. The other half are deferred maintenance. That's not a win, no matter what. Now, we discussed this yesterday, but it is official. The sales tax proposal is heading to the June ballot. This is, of course, to help out the healthcare cuts that are coming from the federal government, although there's some argument, why wouldn't those be made up at the state level? Why is the county doing it? Some of that money's going to the Department of Public Health. I'm sure a whole bunch of it is going to nonprofits. In fact, Lindsay Horvath at the last second tried to make this whole amendment where she wanted to make sure there was a dedicated funding source of all this new tax money that they don't have yet to specifically go to Planned Parenthood, which is interesting because Gavin Newsom and the legislature just allocated like $90 million for that, but I guess that's not enough. And I thought this story is kind of fun. In Gardena, there is a 30-day challenge to encourage kids when they're walking around their neighborhoods to learn how to report issues in their city, like crime or broken streetlights or what have you. So they're actually running a contest where they want kids to be reporting things in the local Gardena app or, of course, My LA 311 and point out things that are wrong with the city. And that's always a good thing. They can't say crime is down if we're reporting the real numbers. The way we report the real numbers is it doesn't matter how small, it doesn't matter how much of a pain in the ass it is, you have to report it. Now, what do these kids get for reporting crime? Apparently Disneyland tickets. So that's a win-win right there. Now, let's go into today's fire updates. We have heard so many concerns about this, and it's so bizarre how at the local, state, and even federal level, they get swept under the rug. Residents in Sierra Madre near the Altadena fire are pretty upset about the fact that they're still testing all kinds of toxins in the soil from that fire. And we're starting to do all these rebuilds, and we're thinking that if we skim 6 inches of dirt off the top, it's going to eliminate those toxins from the soil, and it's not necessarily true. And one of the harder truths of why these fires, specifically the Eaton fire and the Palisades fire, were so devastating is that it's the first major fires we've had in metropolitan areas since the mass adaptation of things like electric cars and solar backup batteries. And here's the thing. While technically those are all technologies that are supposed to help us go green, They're made with materials, some that we have to source from around the world, where if they catch on fire, they're incredibly toxic. That's why there was so much concern about the debris removal in the Palisades, especially considering how close you are to the ocean. It was all the burned out Teslas. And I guess that's true in the Sierra Madre and Altadena area as well. And what do you know? Here we go again. The LADWP announced that the Santa Ynez Reservoir, the reservoir that was bone dry for a lid repair when the fires broke out in the Palisades, is going offline again for almost a year so they could build another new cover. And apparently they're putting out all these pipes, so there will be some kind of way to get water to the Palisades in case of an emergency. And the locals went out to go look at the pipes, and one of them has a giant kink. Not sure if that matters, but it might. Now, this next story, I really don't try to focus on this too much for the specific reason of you can hear stuff about the Epstein thing anywhere. And there's plenty of national shows covering that constantly. I try to always bring a local focus to everything. The whole purpose of this show is to give you all the stories you may have not heard, because cable news is nonstop Epstein, 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 ice, whatever. But I did find it interesting that there's a little bit of uncomfortable situation going on right now when it comes to the LA Olympics, who are run by a guy named Casey Wasserman. And Casey Wasserman's name popped up in those files. And so there are local members of the LA City Council and the Board of Supervisors that's saying maybe this guy who was sending creepy messages to Ghislaine Maxwell 20 years ago shouldn't be in charge of the Olympics. And Gavin keeps getting asked that, and it's making him uncomfortable. But you know what really brought this story into the spotlight, where even people who don't pay attention to the news are paying attention to it? Casey Wasserman is a mega agent, and he has an agency for all kinds of talent, including musicians. And one of his biggest clients just dropped him over this, Chappell Roan. And as soon as I saw that, it made me want to go listen to some more Chappell Roan. Not particularly because of this, just because I like Chappell Roan. Good luck, babe. The subway. I like Chappell Roan. Now, I like this story. CBS LA has a piece on how the LA Police Commission is approving a $2.5 million grant for LAPD's new drone program. And, you know, there's been a lot of talk lately, whether it was the budget conversations last year or even Nithya Raman's recent interview with Conan Nolan, about how one of the biggest line item expenses for the LAPD is the helicopters. And Ulysses wants to get rid of the helicopters entirely because we don't want to police our communities. I feel like I have evolved a little on this issue, where when I first heard about it, I was like, what are you talking about? Of course we need the helicopters. Look at all the high-speed chases. But it has occurred to me, just with the advents of technology, and I could be completely wrong on this, but I think nowadays, couldn't drones do almost anything and everything that you need the helicopters to do? And you're doing them at a much lower cost. And in fact, while the helicopters are pretty much armed with a camera and a spotlight, look, this may be going too far. And sure, I understand the concern that you don't want the government to have this kind of power because they could use it against you. But when it comes to the criminals, specifically the ones in these deadly high-speed chases, the criminals that are evading the cops, couldn't we arm the drones with some kind of, I don't know, EMP that could disable a car's electronics or something? Maybe a grappling winch, maybe a little dart to take out the tires. I don't know. I feel like there are things that we can do. And speaking of not just chases, but you could have these drones respond very quickly because they're placed at very specific places and get there faster than LAPD can in their cars dealing with traffic. So I like the drone program. I've seen some great results in San Francisco's drone program, and I think we need to expand it. And if the drones are that efficient, maybe, just maybe, it's smarter to use those in helicopters. Maybe. And I wasn't sure if I was going to put this in here, but I'm going to tell you why I did. Yesterday, Karen Bass signed an executive order, an executive directive once again, that does pretty much nothing. She wants to make it look like she's doing something to stop the ICE raids in LA, which is not going to happen. And she signs an executive directive that says federal agents can't use city-owned property to stage. Okay, so first, who's going to enforce that? Because the LAPD is not going to enforce that. And two, this is Karen Bass's way of shoring up the rest of the DSA. Because who was at that press conference? Ulysses and Hugo. Who does Karen Bass keep posting about that has endorsed her? Ulysses and Hugo. And I think Isabel was there too. Because I don't know what's going on with the other DSA candidates. We haven't heard yet how they feel about their fellow DSAer, Nithya Raman, running for mayor. Okay, we got to move on to the Bay Area, and this is the wild story. At some point, I got to play it for you. If I don't get a chance to do it on John's show, I got to play it for you here. It's the story about this bizarre, crazy guy who owns a piece of land in Thornton State Beach in Daly City. And he keeps putting up fences to block the public access to the beach, even though the city says you can't do that. He says he can, and apparently he and his girlfriend are going around with a loaded gun in a car threatening people that are trying to use that beach. Dan Noyes, one of the best reporters in the state from ABC7 in the Bay, had an interview with this guy, and apparently it's not the first guy he's talked to him. He talked to him when he was facing all kinds of legal challenges for crimes he committed 10 years ago. So that is a wild story. Highly recommend you check that one out. That one is fascinating. And another ABC7 in the Bay reporter that I love is Leanne Melendez. She has a great in-depth piece of how exactly a program in San Francisco works, a program that we should have down in Los Angeles. And that is the Journey Home or Homeward Bound program, where they pay for bus tickets to send the homeless back to where they came from. You know, and they try to set them up for success with social work and maybe trying to reconnect them with their families. But so many people came to San Francisco for drug tourism, and then they just stayed there. There's also the sadder stories of the people who were trying to get off of drugs that lived in Ohio and West Virginia and were coaxed by all of those rehab centers that do commercials on late night TV in the Midwest, send you to California where you qualify for 1 month of Medi-Cal as soon as you get here. You get your 30 days of rehab and then they kick you out on the street. That's a different kind of story, but it shows you how it works and how people are actually getting on the buses. Like 30 people a month do this down there. Why don't we have this program down here? Oh, that's right. Karen Bass wants you to think that all the people on the streets are from Los Angeles. Sure. The teacher strike is still going on 3 days, and they're still not any closer, although one of the things that they finally did agree on is limiting AI's use in schools because the teachers know that at some point the robots are taking their jabs. And speaking of the homeless crisis, a few months ago in Oakland, Barbara Lee held a ribbon-cutting ceremony at a place called the Phoenix Center, which was affordable housing, permanent supportive housing for the homeless. Well, that was in November when they did that ribbon cutting, and they still haven't actually put anybody in there because the building's still not done, because the nonprofit that got all this money to build it has been shorting all the subcontractors, which is just something we see a lot of. And Alameda County is also considering extending the Flock license plate camera program, which they should. I don't understand privacy advocates in 2026. You don't want a camera checking for license plates of stolen cars and other criminals, but you are voluntarily carrying a phone with you that is actively listening to everything you say. You are voluntarily posting about your entire life every single day. I just don't get it. That program has been very successful in certain places, like San Francisco. It would be more successful if it was further implemented in places like Oakland or, I don't know, Los Angeles, where you have residents in Encino who had to band together to buy their own Flock camera. And how about this? Tesla is a little late to the party when it comes to the robotaxi, even though Elon was the first one talking about it. But apparently a new Tesla Cybercab was spotted near Stanford, and although it's mostly for show, I'm a little weirded out that this one has no steering wheel. I mean, yes, the Waymo has one, but nobody's driving it. But I always found it weird that like Elon every year is like, this is going to be the year. Every Tesla is going to become a robotaxi. When does that actually happen? I guess they're in testing phases in Austin. They're starting to, I guess, roll them out in the Bay Area. But meanwhile, Waymo has been so prominent in San Francisco and the Bay Area and now coming down here and expanding in Southern California. I feel like, I don't know, maybe Elon's a little late to the party on that one. We got a lot more coming up here on the California Report, so stick with us. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. Before we get back to the California Report, I have to give you an update on Imelda Padilla.
The neighborhood kids, the down-ass kids don't like it.
We told you at the top of the show that we're replacing some streetlights with solar lights because of all the copper wire theft. Well, there was a hearing about that at LA City Hall today, and Imelda Padilla had an interesting thing to add to the conversation.
In my neighborhood, I talked to some of my neighbors about whether we were ready to start a petition in order to get more street lights. And I actually had some community members say, I don't want more lights because then I can't look at the stars. So, not everyone in Los Angeles necessarily, wants to bring in lights. So would you be able to kind of tell us?
Not everybody in LA wants the lights because they want to see the stars. Imelda, there's so much smog in this city, you can't see the stars.
Broken windy theory.
Maybe an IQ test is necessary for city council. Although, who's the idiot? The city council member or the person that voted them in? Good question. In Sacramento, there is a dispute going on between the city of Stockton and the San Joaquin Transit, and it left people stranded who thought they were going to be getting on a bus because the CEO got put on administrative leave and all the bus drivers immediately walked off the job. And it's just another weird thing. I don't know what it is about Stockton and Christina Fugazi, but there seems to be feuds in every department in that city and that county. Now, in San Diego, I told you the local electeds are running scared, and city council members originally were pitching yet another place to add paid parking at Mission Bay and the beaches. And what do you know? After all the blowback with Balboa Park, they're starting to be like, maybe they don't like this. Maybe they don't like being nickeled and dimed. And maybe if we keep going down this road, we're all going to lose our jobs come election day, which they all should. And we told you yesterday in Fresno about this $1.5 million embezzlement from the Fresno Arts Council. Well, the art community came out to talk about how outraged they are, but apparently the city's still going to be doing business with this arts council, even though, by the way, what was the $1.5 million even supposed to be for? There is so much grafting going on when it comes to government grants, and I feel like we got to tap down on a lot of this. In the governor's race, there were some prominent interviews that happened yesterday. Matt Mahan went on CBS LA to talk about why he wants to run for governor. Steve Hilton went on KTLA to talk about why he wants to run for governor and this little beef he's got going on with Chad Bianco, because only one of them can be the Republican in the race, right? Where apparently he's ripping on Chad Bianco for taking a knee during the BLM riots. And Katie Porter puts out a video on her YouTube channel talking about how the real reason Californians are on the streets, it's not mental health and it's not addiction, it's all the cost of housing. We discussed that and got quite a few interesting calls on the John Phillips Show today, so you can always check out that podcast. And in the crime blotter, Newport Beach wants to crack down on spring break partiers with more fines and more cops. Go take that to some other beach. They don't want it. And we've told you about all the backlash to Balboa Park in San Diego. Well, San Diego PD is now offering a $1,000 reward for anyone that has information on who's been vandalizing all the parking kiosks, which has cost over $70,000. And I don't think anyone's going to talk. I think the residents are upset, and this is their free speech pushing back against an oppressive government. Now, I do have a late edition, and I have to play this for you before we go to break. Because today, Gavin Newsom held a press conference announcing that the legislature is going to be funding Planned Parenthood to the tune of $90 million. And at that press conference, Gavin was asked a whole lot of questions. that weren't about that because, Gavin doesn't sit down for interviews. Gavin doesn't do regular just press conferences. So if you got to ask him a question, it's got to be unrelated. It's something like this. Well, in the middle of Gavin answering questions, Jennifer Newsom, his wife, steps into the podium, pushes Gavin out of the way, and starts screaming at the mostly female reporters.
We just find it incredulous that we have Planned Parenthood here, and women are 51% of the population. And the majority of the questions, all of these questions have really been about other issues. So it's just fascinating. You have this incredible women's caucus and all these allies, and you're not asking about it. And this happens over and over and over and over again. You wonder why we have such a horrific war on women in this country and that these guys are getting away with it because you don't seem to care. So I just offer that with love.
That's not going over well. Ashley Zavala posted about it because it was directed at her, and so many other men and women in the journalism industry are pushing back, be like, no, 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 no. That is our job. You don't get to tell us what questions we get to ask. And good for them, because that is unacceptable. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. It is the News Blitz with Randy Wang on Talk Radio 790 KABC. We're here every single day from 5 to 6 talking about the local issues that matter to you most and taking your phone calls at 800-222-5222. 1-800-222-5222. Your emails at randywangradio@gmail.com. Search for the KABC News Blitz wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to the California Report, my daily list of all the local stories that matter to you at randywangradio.substack.com. There has been a very eventful week when it comes to the LA mayor's race. To talk to us about this and much, much more, I'd like to welcome to the show. She's a mother, a wife, a lawyer. She's on the LA GOP Central Committee. She's a California GOP delegate. She's with the Jewish Community Engagement Chair. She is on a mission to make California red again. Elizabeth Barcohana, welcome to the News Blitz.
Thanks, Randy. So great to be with you today.
And of course, I should mention you can follow her on Twitter at @E_Barcohana or Elizabeth from California on Instagram. So we've had quite an eventful week when it comes to the LA mayor's race, when out of nowhere, right at the last second of the filing deadline, we find out that LA City Councilwoman Nithya Raman is challenging Karen Bass for the mayor's seat. What do you make of that?
Yes, literally at the last minute. It was about 2 hours before the filing deadline closed. And it surprised everyone because all eyes were on Lindsay Horvath. And then at the last minute, she decided that she's not going to run and because she would have to give up her supervisor re-election bid to do that. Nithya Raman does not have to do that. So she took the reins. And this is a classic move by the Democratic Socialists of America. So what they do is they look for vulnerable establishment Democrats like Karen Bass, where the voters will take any alternative because they're so embroiled in controversy, like Karen Bass. And in late January, there was a poll done that showed that 64% of Los Angeles would rather vote for someone else, like literally that was the choice, no name, just someone else, other than Karen Bass. Now, that is exactly the openings that these far left radical candidates look for. And so Raman is taking it.
Well, and it sure seems that blood is in the water, where this was just days after the LA Times finally reported on something that Spencer Pratt's been talking about for weeks and weeks and weeks, that Karen Bass personally ordered the doctoring of the after action report when it comes to all the failures of the Palisades fire.
That's right. That's right. So thankfully, there's also civil litigation going on. But, you know, when the city was like, well, we're going to investigate and we're going to come up with an after action report, you know that if you can't objectively investigate yourself. So we knew that there was going to be funny business. The issues that were revised, like about how there wasn't enough resources pre-deployed to the west side of LA, we knew that the day of the fires because it took the fire trucks almost an hour to get from where they were staged to the Palisades. And this issue was one of the reasons why the fire chief, Crowley, was fired by Karen Bass. So we knew that this was already an issue. It wasn't a surprise. But what we didn't know was who ordered the report to be watered down. And the fact that it was Karen Bass herself was what was new information.
And it's something that she's trying to deny, but who else would make these changes? There's so much corruption coming out of so many things with Karen Bass. I think she looks weaker than ever. I think that poll that you mentioned had a lot to do with it as well, where everyone was trying to figure out, okay, who's going to run against her? It's got to be somebody. But here's the question I'm sure a lot of voters have, because now you have probably the most prominent person in the race running against her, which is a high-ranking member of the city council. Nithya is the head of the Homelessness and Housing Committee. What would really be the difference between a Mayor Bass 2.0 or a Mayor Nithya Raman? What are we in store for if she actually wins?
So both are far left, but Nithya Raman is way to the far left. She is a DSA member. So this would be a complete disaster. For example, she does not believe in enforcing homeless encampment bans near sensitive areas like schools because, in her words, it doesn't make kids safer. Now, there are some parts of the city in LA, in council members' districts, where they don't enforce this ban near sensitive sites, where kids literally have to walk through drug dens, outdoor drug dens, to get to school. So, the idea, that she and a lot of her voters, covers parts of the city that are affluent. They live behind iron gates and don't have to suffer the consequences of their own policies. The DSA basically, in their own words, they support disarming, defunding, abolishing police, closing the jails, decriminalizing drugs, raising taxes. They don't believe in private property. They are engaged in a complete takeover of the Democratic Party infrastructure from within. That is their goal. And it's part of the soft revolution that we're seeing across the country. So it would be, if Karen Bass's reelection was going to be status quo, and with including how bad things have already gotten under her leadership, don't forget we have the Olympics coming up under the next mayor's term, but it would get worse under Raman if she were elected to the mayor's office.
We're speaking with Elizabeth Barcohana. You can get her on Instagram at Elizabeth from California. I have found it interesting. I watched the entire 27-minute interview that Nithya Raman did with NBC4's Conan Nolan, and it's really strange to me how she's running because she says the city is broken, but she is a member of the city council who is equally as culpable for so many of the failures that are going on in this city. But she says one of the reasons she needs to run is that she thinks it shouldn't take a year to fix a streetlight. And I agree with her on that. But she's also the same person that didn't want to go after anyone for catalytic converter theft because she said it was Toyota's fault for making Priuses too easy to break.
Well, those are two separate issues. One is the functioning of the city, and the other is she doesn't believe in putting people in jail. She doesn't believe in people who are breaking the law should be put in jail. It's they were tempted into stealing the catalytic converters. It's like how AOC said, they needed to loot the stores during the BLM riots because they needed to eat. They were hungry. And I think the one thing, if we leave your listeners with one thing today, it's that this race could be decided in the June 2nd election. And I don't call it the June 2nd election. I call it the May election because the DSA machine in LA is well-oiled, very well organized, and they will ballot harvest the day the ballots come out, whether it's May 2nd, 3rd, or 4th, where they hit the mailboxes, they're going to start collecting those ballots. And so it's imperative that everyone who is a resident in the city of LA when they get their ballot, you fill it out and you turn it back in, because this race could be decided if one of the candidates gets more than 50% of the vote. It does not go to November. So she's also counting on skating by in a low turnout election by either, beating Bass outright because she's so weak in this low turnout May election, or if the two of them get into the top two and end up in a runoff head-to-head in November, she thinks that she can beat her then. So she's going to get two chances. And it's very critical that everyone who does not believe that Marxist principles are going to be the pathway toward improving Los Angeles, that they vote in May and not wait until Election Day in June, or God forbid, wait until November.
Well, I think that's so important what you say, because one of the ways that these candidates, whether it's Nithya or Hugo Soto Martinez or Ulysses Hernandez, got into all these seats in the city council, where now there is a significant block of the DSA, is because voter turnout in the city of LA is so low. And you're right, when Nithya was up for re-election in 2024, even though it seemed that she was very unpopular just by how irritated residents were with her inaction on things like homelessness, with her inaction to even correspond with her constituents, she won that primary outright with just a little over 50%. So Correct. She did not have to go into a runoff. And the last thing we want to see is something like that happen again. This race needs to go towards November, and there should be a real choice. Ideally, it'd be great if Spencer Pratt was in this race until November and could make the case every single day how both Nithya and Karen Bass failed the city on a daily basis. But the only way to make that happen is for people to participate and to vote. When they get that ballot in the mail, send it in.
That's right. Absolutely right.
Before you go, I've got to play something for you. I want to get your initial reaction to what happened in Sacramento today, where Gavin Newsom was holding a press conference with his wife, Jennifer Newsom, and a whole bunch of members of the legislature and Planned Parenthood, announcing a $90 million funding plan because of the cuts from the federal government. When the press conference turned to the Q&A, a lot of the reporters in the room had questions for the governor, because the governor doesn't hold regular press conference where he just takes questions. The governor doesn't do long-form interviews. So he was getting asked about things like the high-speed rail and the refineries that are going out of business and him wanting to go to Germany, what have you, Casey Wasserman. And his wife, Jennifer Seibold Newsom, takes the podium out of Gavin Newsom's hands and screams at the mostly female reporters for how dare they ask an off-topic question. Here's what she said just hours ago.
We just find it incredulous that we have Planned Parenthood here, and women are 51% of the population. And the majority of the questions, all of these questions, have really been about other issues. So it's just fascinating. You have this incredible women's caucus and all these allies, and you're not asking about it. And this happens over and over and over and over again. You wonder why we have such a horrific war on women in this country, and that these guys are getting away with it, because you don't seem to care. So I just offer that with love.
What do you make of what the first partner said today?
Well, Gavin Newsom has made her part of his office, even though nobody elected her, nobody voted for his wife. And her tone and contempt for the press asking questions that are more important than what she believes is important to their viewers, listeners, readers. For the most part, probably the press in that room was friendly towards them. And, they're still wanting to, they believe that the Democrats, the establishment, they believe so much and they're so used to having control over the narrative in the media. That tone that she spoke to them just reveals that. And the last thing is that I would like to say is abortion is not a live issue in California in this election. What are live issues is the fact that we have a budget that's completely out of control, the money is not the problem in California. It is the spending and the waste that is the problem. The fact that he's supposed to be governor of this huge state, huge economy, and he is basically, running for president. He has started his presidential campaign, leaving the issues in the state to languish and get worse. The questions that the reporters were asking were completely legitimate, and for her to insert herself was, I opened X this afternoon to, I don't think that was very well received at all whatsoever. A lot of people saying that, we didn't vote for her. We voted for him, and he has to be held to account. Like you said, he doesn't get in front of the press very often.
You're totally right about that. You can follow her on Instagram, Elizabeth from California. You can follow her on Twitter at _Barcohana. Elizabeth Barcohana, thank you so much for joining us today.
Anytime, Randy. Great to be with you.
It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. And do I have a treat for you? 790 KABC welcomes Noah Kahan, The Great Divide Tour at the Rose Bowl, August 15th. Tickets are on sale Thursday at Ticketmaster.com. But right now, calling number 9 at 1-888-795-2222 gets a pair of tickets to the show. Tickets furnished by Live Nation. Good luck dialing. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. And how about a little Wine Wednesday to end today's show? The other night, I made chicken tikka masala, and it came out great. So when I do chicken tikka masala, I've learned my lesson from when I try to do a healthier version of it. You got to use chicken thighs, and you got to use, even though I don't mind non-fat Greek yogurt, you got to use full-fat, like regular yogurt for this. So first thing you got to do is marinate your chicken. So I take my chicken thighs, I put them in a metal bowl with about a cup of yogurt, and that yogurt has a whole lot of different spices in it, including garam masala, cayenne, chili powder, ginger, garlic, cumin, coriander, and turmeric. It's a lot, but that's what you're supposed to do. It's supposed to be a lot of different spices. So I let that soak for pretty much a whole day. And then when I'm ready to cook, I go ahead and get a pan very hot, put my marinated chicken thighs with the yogurt right in the pan. As long as they've got some fat on them, they won't burn your pan. And I don't cook them all the way. Instead of doing like 5 minutes on each side, I'll do 4 minutes on each side. Then I'll take them off to the cutting board, cut them in little cubes, then finish them in the pan. In the meantime, I saute a whole onion and I add a can of tomato sauce. And then I add all those spices in once again to make that tikka masala sauce. Add back in the chicken, let that simmer for about 20 minutes. And I used to pair this with rice, but Trader Joe's cauliflower rice, it works really well. So the last 5 minutes of the cook, you pour in a frozen package of Trader Joe's cauliflower rice, let that simmer. It's going to be great. I like to top it with cilantro. But what's the wine pairing? Well, you're talking about really spicy. It doesn't have to be overly overpowering spicy, but it's a very spice-forward dish. It's also very tomatoey. And when I hear spicy and tomatoey, I'm thinking a big red. So we usually pair chicken tikka masala, if we have one, with a Petite Syrah. And we opened a Petite Syrah from Dovecote Wines in the Los Olivos area, and it was fabulous. This is a really big, velvety hammer of a wine, blackberry and blueberry notes. It pairs perfectly, puts out the fire in your mouth, and it's a wine you can never drink on your own. But when it's standing up to a tikka masala, they make each other better, and it's a great dish. I'm having the leftovers tomorrow, so hopefully I have another Petite Syrah in the fridge. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC.